My name is John Scott-Railton, and I'm going to talk to you using what I like to call the spyware telescope. So lots of different forms of surveillance in the world, but to really understand their impact, it makes sense to start somewhere. So we start here. I work at a place called the Citizen Lab with a large group of amazing colleagues. We've been around for more than 20 years. We are ferociously independent, and we spend our days working with activists, journalists, dissidents, and others that are targeted with sophisticated surveillance technology. Today, I'm going to start you with a story. Here we are in Rwanda in 1944, and as I'm sure all of you know, Rwanda was going through a genocide. In the Rwandan capital of Kigali, there were not many safe places to be if you were a target of that horrible violence. There was, however, the Hôtel des Mille Collines, a bastion of safety for many who sought refuge from the genocide. The hotel's general manager, Paul Rusesabagina, who saved lives. Paul was widely, globally recognized for what he did, including in the movie Hotel Rwanda. But like so many people of conscience, Paul did not stop with that one act. He continued to use his voice and what he felt and express what he thought, including his concerns about the new government in Rwanda. He also built himself a life in the United States with a beautiful family. For his troubles, Paul was kidnapped, rendered to Rwanda, and put on a show trial, accused of all sorts of terrible things. But he had a secret weapon. Two amazing daughters, Karine and Anaïs. Anaïs, who's here, can we give her a round of applause? Karine, who is not, but let's give her a round of applause as well. These two amazing women used their voices, their platforms, their personal courage to tell the story of their father and advocate for his return home, including on the stage at Oslo Freedom Forum here in 2022. Well, something else was happening in 2022. Citizen Lab, for the first time, was running a spyware checking booth. It was an idea that we had bounced around with HRF, and ultimately we came up with this project. Karine came to get her device checked, and she had a sense that something might be going on with the phone. She'd heard about it through the Pegasus project. She'd had a first check. And sure enough, when we checked, we found evidence that Pegasus spyware was on Karine's phone. Now, the thing is, it was on her phone while she was calling lawmakers, while she was doing strategy, while she was advocating for her father's freedom. In other words, an autocrat half a world away was one step ahead of what they were doing. Now, they still secured their father's freedom. But how on earth did we get to this place where autocrats are no longer even limited by the bounds of geography? Well, the answer begins probably somewhere in the Arab Spring. For a while, in those early, heady months, it seemed like technology moved people faster than autocrats. But the truth is, dictators will always roll up. They will always find technological tools for surveillance. And they have a standard palette of colors. They can surveil. They can infiltrate. These are actual Stasi infiltrators, which pretty compelling. I don't know, the last guy looks like a hodler. What do you think? But they can also disrupt. And of course, if that doesn't work, they can use violence. And when that really doesn't work, they can deprive liberty. They can kill. But ultimately, these are big, complicated machineries. They are expensive. They take a lot of work. And they are very analog. Today's dictator is looking for something a little bit similar, a little bit simpler, and wants to throw cash at the problem because they know that fear and the self-censorship that it engenders is a more powerful tool than any mechanism of physical control. So they go to places like the Wiretappers Ball here in Prague, and they talk to companies like NSO Group, which I'm sure many of you have heard about. NSO Group, based in Israel, sells spyware called Pegasus. Now, Pegasus, people have heard about it. It can do everything that you as the user can do on your phone, from looking at your encrypted messaging to tracking your locations, your movements, see what you're viewing. You are an open book. It can even do some things you can't, like accessing your cloud stuff, surreptitiously and over time. But the other half of this problem set is that this kind of technology, these are screenshots from another tech, allows your digital life to become scrutable to a security service, who you're talking to, the meaningful contacts, the not meaningful contacts. This is the efficiency of surveillance. Here's another price list from a different company. And the key thing to take away, you don't need to look at the numbers, is to know that when the acquisition of this may be pretty expensive, the marginal cost of new infections is often low, which means that when governments get access to this, the temptation to start using it for political purposes is really high. So if you talk to companies like NSO, what do they tell you? They say, well, you know, we're here to target terrorists and criminals. Well, let's talk about some not terrorists and not criminals. Saudi Arabia got its hands on Pegasus, and these are a bunch of countries where we found Pegasus infections attributed to their operation. Let's go to Bishop University here in Canada and find Omar Abdul Aziz, a well-known YouTuber who was a thorn in the Saudi government's side. And one day, Omar, looking for those gains, orders a big tub of protein, and almost immediately afterward gets a text message with a link on it. And like most people, he clicks. He was, in fact, infected in that moment with Pegasus spyware. We worked on his case and published his story. What we didn't know is that just about a day and a bit later, a world away in Turkey, Jamal Khashoggi was going to the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. He never exited that building. What we learned through our investigation and the investigations of our peers at places like Amnesty Tech and the Pegasus Project is that his wife had been targeted before his murder and was infected with Pegasus. And after it, his fiancée, was monitored as well. Pegasus was all around this horrible murder. It doesn't end with Saudi Arabia. Wherever we scratch as researchers and wherever we've scratched over the past decade, we find cases from Thailand to Mexico, passing through clergy in Togo, and just about everybody else who is displeased an autocrat or who's tangled with cartels. Meet Javier Valdez, the publisher of a small newspaper in Rio Doce, Mexico. He was brutally assassinated and his devices taken. As his widow, Griselda, also a journalist, was mourning his death and advocating for an investigation, she was hit with Pegasus, and so were his colleagues. Not exactly terrorists and criminals, certainly not on the target side. Now, what I've talked to you about thus far is one-click attacks, where you get a message and you click on it and your device is infected. Still pretty sophisticated, but these days, the real sophistication runs in what are called zero-click attacks. Meet Lujan, well-known activist for women drivers in Saudi Arabia, also detained for her trouble. There was an amazing campaign for her freedom, making fun of Gulf states' attempts to launder their reputations. She was eventually freed, thanks to a tremendous international effort. But some months after her freedom, something showed up on her device. You can't see it here, but these are a bunch of GIF files. We've anonymized their names. These were not actually GIF files. This was another infection attempt. And what my colleague Bill Marzak determined is this was a zero-click infection. Nothing that she had done had caused this infection. 1 minute her device was clean, the next minute it was infected, spewing data to an adversary across the globe. Now the bananas part is that this particular zero-click exploited a legacy piece of image processing from one of these. Remember when these people used to use these things? To make a PDF smaller. That simple bit of code, like old DNA from the Pleistocene era, remained in image processing and parsing systems in modern phones. And the attackers developed an entire Turing-complete computer that sat inside that little image parser to infect and monitor a device. An unbelievably sophisticated exploit, as Google, who worked with us, confirmed. But something else happened after that discovery. Anybody know how many current Apple devices there are in the world? How many active Apple? Shout it out. How many Apple devices? 3 billion. I'm listening. Some billions, right? Fucking billions. Now, here's the thing. Every single one of them got an update, a security update, thanks to her. Thanks to her vigilance and thanks to her willingness to get checked. But here's the truth. Despite all of these big-to-us scandals and drama about this industry and these companies, if you look at NSO's debt valuation, not much changed. Proliferation continued. It also affected governments, heads of state. Governmental organizations got targeted. I remember when we called the UK to be like, hey, by the way, Downing Street, bad news. We found evidence of a Pegasus infection there. But then in November 2021, things started getting spicy for NSO Group, partly because they had displeased the US government. They got stuck with a kind of a sanction-light thing. Apple also sued them, again, thanks in part to our friend. And suddenly, we began seeing impact. The market got worried. This total scofflaw industry started experiencing meaningful financial consequences. Some brakes were being pumped on proliferation. And finally, after a decade of shouting in the wilderness, we're like, okay, maybe we've got some impact here. Maybe something is changing. But it didn't end there. Corinne was able to join me, Corinne Kanimba, Paul's daughter, was able to join me in testifying to Congress about the dual human rights and national security impacts of the proliferation of this technology. In other words, listen, government, whether or not you care about human rights, you're going to get hacked with this stuff too, because dictators never stop if you give them a cookie. They always want the milk as well. And consequences continued. Suddenly, it seemed like a dangerous thing, right? spyware was made dangerous again. Very good, very good. Some companies shut down, others lost the ability to fundraise. It was bad. We also got an entire ecosystem of organizations, including us, now working on this problem set. Things have started changing, and most recently, WhatsApp sued NSO back in 2019, just won. Turns out a jury of 12 regular citizens learning about this business model is like, this is very bad. This should be punished. So NSO got hit with $167 million punitive damages. Very bad. Very painful for them. So big progress in some ways, but are we winning, right? This is the question. As you're sitting here thinking about your own phone, right, do you know what's on there? Are we winning? Well, a couple of weeks ago, I talked to this guy, Ciro. Ciro got notified from Apple that he had been targeted with mercenary spyware. Ciro's a journalist in Italy. And of course, if you're a journalist, you got sources to protect. It's a very scary thought, right? Maybe your sources are exposed. Very scary thought. But he wasn't entirely surprised. And this is because earlier this year, his colleague Francesco Cancellato had been notified by Meta and WhatsApp that he was targeted with Paragon spyware. You haven't heard of that one before. What was that? Well, let's talk about Paragon. Paragon is an American-funded, super secretive Israeli spyware company that makes cool stuff. They sort of represent themselves as the Pegasus 2.0, right? Fewer spyware abuses, don't worry. Definitely not findable. Well, we found them. And so did Meta. They were, again, using an ultra-sophisticated zero-click vulnerability. You got added to a group. A PDF was shared on the group. There was some malicious code. The victim device gets infected. The victim sees nothing. Very bad, very scary. Of course, the Paragon and mercenary spyware cases in Italy didn't end there. We found a whole bunch more. Priests and others doing sea rescue of migrants. That case continues. And the unfortunate truth, this is the PEGA committee, which the EU set up a couple years ago to look into mercenary spyware. The unfortunate truth right now is that Europe has a mercenary spyware crisis. Despite all the fancy talk about privacy on this topic, they're terrible. Am I optimistic? I'm not sure. But I do believe that Pegasus is coming soon to your phone for another reason. You don't have to be a world-class dissident. We see that these companies have real trouble controlling their stuff, whether it's ex-employees trying to sell things or targeting love interests with it. It's bad. But there's something else. Anybody here remember WannaCry, right? Sophisticated US government tools made their way to bad actors, very bad ransomware, a lot of infections. Well, time and time again, we find exploit code first used by the mercenary spyware industry showing up used by Russian governmental hackers. This was some great work by Google. Happened a couple times, enough for it to be clear that it's not an accident. Now, there are a couple of reasons why that could have happened. Maybe the code got leaked, which would be very bad, or they were doing business with the same exploit developers that are somehow selling to the Russian government, which is also very bad. But either way, this stuff is coming to you. Let me tell you what keeps me awake at night, though. The first is that mercenary spyware keeps changing. The footprint is getting smaller. A lot of the things that it takes to infect a device are kind of noisy. Of course, there's a cat and mouse game with researchers like us to hide from it. But in the long run, we think these companies, Paragon being an example, are getting smaller. What really scares me, though, is that these companies are angling to get into every democracy they can think of. If they have their way, they will be part of daily policing, and in governments that take a dim view in democracies towards real freedom and real freedom of speech, this is going to be used, again, towards those who express their conscience. But the real elephant in this room is that nothing is static. And a lot of governments around the world are thinking about artificial intelligence. Now, I'm deeply concerned about the fact that Saudi and other autocrats are really jonesing to be the places that parse a lot of our data and gain a deep understanding of human behavior. This freaks me out. This is not the problem I'm going to talk to you about, although we should be thinking about that one. What freaks me out is this shit. We've got a very interesting transformation happening, which is that people are thinking about AI and wanting to bring AI to users. They think, okay, let's come up with on-device AI processing. Let's do private clouds. Now, this is a cool idea, right? It's more privacy preserving. It means that you may have some more control of your data. But it means something else. It means that you've got effective agents sitting on your devices, sitting in places that can't easily be looked at for bad things by, say, big platforms, that can be instructed to do stuff. So right now, if I want to hack you, say I want to hack your phone, right? I want to record your conversations around you. That's like some hundreds of megabytes of audio, right? I got to take that. I got to exfiltrate it from your device. That's noisy. That's findable. If I can hack your device and I can talk to your on-device AI and say, listen, transcribe everything and just listen for the one keyword that I'm looking for, and then send me that, right? Like it's like a kilobyte. So what I worry about is that the mercenary spyware industry is coming for the AI agents that we are all integrating into our lives, both the public ones and the private ones. And when that happens, this shit is unstoppable. As you're walking out of here, I want you to get thinking about this problem. I want you to get in touch if you, because of who you are, what you do, think that you may be targeted. And I want you to get checked. We're doing it here. If you are a designer, I want you to design for device compromise. I want you to anticipate key theft. I want you to focus on ephemerality so that the impact is not too terrible if a device does get hacked. I want you to come up with robust recovery mechanisms, and I want you to watch crash logs, because those are the things, time and time again, that find the ephemeral stuff. There is a bonus. And I'm going to end on this. If you have an iPhone, you should turn on lockdown mode. For years, we have seen it successfully blocking mercenary spyware attacks. Very cool. And Google has just announced that in Android 16, sorry, Google, there will be something called advanced protection mode, which has some similar features to lockdown mode. This is an empirically designed mode that makes you harder and more expensive to hack. We recommend it to everyone. Oh, and please get checked. And on that note, I'd just like to acknowledge the many targets that come forward over the years. We thank our security to them. Show of hands if you have an iPhone. Show of hands if you have an Android. Two hands up. Okay, keep them all up. Okay, Windows computer. Your devices have received updates thanks to vigilant members of civil society who've gone checked. Thank you very much.